I'm Huon Hooke, and this is The Real Review. So the wine we're tasting today is Margan Family Aged Release Semillon 2015 from the Hunter Valley. So the Margan family has been in the Hunter Valley for at least a couple of generations. Andrew Margan is the current winemaker and proprietor with his wife Lisa. Their father Frank was also a well-known man in the Hunter Valley. He had a restaurant in Cessnock. He wrote books about wine. He wrote columns in newspapers about wine. He was quite a character in the district. Andrew started off at Tyrrell's and worked at Tyrrell's for quite a number of years under the tutelage of Murray Tyrrell, who taught him a lot about making great Hunter Semillon. And what better teacher could you have? And in 1996, Andrew went off by himself and started his own business. He took over some old vineyards in the Broke-Forditch region. And Broke-Forditch is off to one side from the main Picolbin area of the Hunter Valley. It's got its own terroir, its own mesoclimate, very similar to the core of the Hunter, but subtly different. And Andrew had a lot to do with getting sub-regional status for Broke-Forditch. And he is a shameless promoter of the district. He is a great believer in it, and all of his wines are estate grown. In other words, they all come from his own vineyards. He never buys any grapes in. So he's a great believer in the Broke-Forditch region. There's a bit of limestone under the soil in Broke-Forditch, which sets it apart. But the vineyards that this comes from are mainly red volcanic loams, which have come from the outflow of the Broken Back Range in distant past. And this gives the wine a different style to a lot of the Hunter Valley Semillons, which are grown on the sandy river flats around about Hermitage Road area, where the soils are quite white and sandy and shallow and poor in fertility. Andrew's style of Semillon has generally been a bit softer, a bit richer, not quite as dry or as austere as a lot of the main Picolbin district Semillons. And I think that's deliberately to make it more approachable young while he builds his brand. He's obviously built his brand by now, and he's starting to produce these aged Semillons that are made much more in the classic style that he would have learnt when he was at Tyrrell's. So this is a much more austere, dry, low alcohol, linear type of Semillon, and takes time. And obviously the wine has been kept back for 5 years before it was released. So that's part and parcel of the style. It's very low alcohol. I think it's only about 11% alcohol. Let me just check the bottle. 11.5, which is it's pretty typical. Good Hunter Semillon for aging is between 10.5 and 12% alcohol. And that gives you the tightness and the linearity and the terrific purity and aging potential. So they also have a great winery restaurant at Margan. So if you're in the Hunter and you're thinking of being a bit adventurous, go off to one side. It's worth the trip out to Broke-Forditch to visit Margan's and have a meal. So how does this wine taste at the age of 5.5 years? And a lot of people in the Hunter now are re-releasing Semillon at about that age. Tyrrell's, Brokenwood, various people release or re-release wine, Semillon at that age, because it's starting to come into this beautiful drinking zone. It's got a long way to go, but it's a great wine now. Let's try it. And the nose immediately gives you the classic Hunter Semillon characters. There's a beeswax, there's almost a touch of candle wax, lemon balm, talky aromas, a touch of fresh herbs, a touch of floral note. Really quite a fascinating nose. Really hasn't developed much toastiness yet. Quite often by the age of 5.5 they'd be getting quite toasty. This wine comes from a very good vintage for white wines, 2015. Slow aging vintage, and it will develop toastiness, but it's happening at a slower rate than might happen in a warmer year. Really, really beautiful nose. Really makes me want to drink it. The other thing, of course, I didn't mention is lemon. There's always lemon in Hunter Valley Semillon, but hopefully in a good wine, it's much more complex than just lemon. And this is that sort of wine. and it's starting to fill out nicely. It's still delicate and crisp and light-bodied and has this lovely linearity, line and length, but it's starting to soften. I remember when this wine was younger, the acidity was more noticeable. It's not noticeable strongly now. It's just beautifully drinking at its peak, and I think that will go on for at least another 5, probably 10 years. Andrew Margan says this is a 20-year wine, and I wouldn't doubt it at all. He knows what he's talking about. I would think start drinking it now, but buy half a case or something and drink one over every year over the next half a dozen years. So how do we rate this Margan Semillon? Well, we scored it 95, which is a gold ribbon score, and it was rated number 2 out of 43 Semillons from the Lower Hunter from the 2015 vintage that we tasted. So that's a hell of a high ranking. It's a top rank rating on our system, and we suggest that you can drink it obviously from now until 2030, by which time it'll be 15 years old. And as Andrew Margan says, it will go quite a bit longer if you look after it very well. So really, a really very smart wine indeed. What would Andrew Margan serve with his own wine? Andrew's gone to the freshly shucked oysters line with this wine, and he's suggested that you put a finger lime and cracked pepper dressing with it. Sounds pretty good to me. Finger lime being, a native Aussie citrusy flavoured thing, which goes really well. Any kind of citrus goes well with oysters. Cracked pepper, yes. I would only add a bit of really good bread with some nice butter on it, and that would be a meal in itself. Thank you, Andrew. Good health.